Yo, welcome back to another edition of the Men Who Cry podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, review, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to tell another friend. If you not do these things, I have to assume that you didn't check your credit score after you came back from Coachella. I can't believe they actually made that a 2-day event. On today's episode, it's just going to be your boy, me, Just. We had some health issues, I would say, with our boy Reek. Get well soon. Nothing too serious. He just needs to get some R&R before we get to this draft, because we had the NFL draft coming up. Lots of interesting things to talk about the draft, in the sense that this draft seems somewhat boring. I think drafts end up being dictated by, in large part, due to quarterback play. And I've said this on previous pods, but by and large part, I think all drafts are antiquated, and simply we only have the draft, especially televised version of the draft, because of money. It is very much a TV product that people buy into. You saw what happened last year, where the whole conversation was essentially about Shedeur Sanders and where he was going to go, and the fact that he dropped in the draft all the way to the 5th round. I bet got people watching for so long. Me and a couple buddies of mine went to a bachelor party last year around this same time for the draft. Everywhere we went, we kept like talking to people. We're in New Orleans and being like, did this Shedeur get drafted? I'll never forget. We walked into some shop that had the TV playing, and the friends I was with, they're not that big into football like I am. They're kind of asking me, like, is this kind of expected? And, at the time, it was definitely a little shocking. I mean, I think we didn't see him get drafted, but we got there. It was around round 3, I believe, at this point. And he still wasn't drafted, which was kind of crazy. And I feel like we don't have that same kind of pop in this draft. But I think there's going to be a lot of interesting kind of players to talk about. Fernando Mendoza is going to go number 1. That's been all but confirmed through every single source that you can find out. And I am somewhat buying into Mendoza. I don't necessarily think that I don't necessarily think you have to have one of the best quarterbacks in the league to win the Super Bowl, right? We have seen quarterbacks who don't necessarily profile to be Hall of Famers get teams to Super Bowls, if not win Super Bowls. And I think we are getting a better understanding of how much is on the quarterback's plate as far as to get the team to win games, and how much is it just you need your team to be good. And I think for someone like Mendoza, I think he's fine in pretty much every stat. And the one issue that I think a lot of people might have with him is that he might just be kind of weird and kind of quirky. The thing that I always feel like is the people who struggle the most in the NFL, or just in life in general, are people who feel like they're putting up a front, right? Case in point, even though this player did win a Super Bowl, how many times have we talked about Russell Wilson being kind of felt phony, or doesn't present himself as being his authentic self, and his teammates turned on him, right? Whether it was in Seattle at some point, whether it was in Denver, New York, you didn't really hear that too much per se, but definitely in those last two stops, it definitely seemed like it rubbed some people the wrong way. And the NFL is full of multiple people, good and bad. And I always feel like the ultimate deodorant for all this is, can you ball? The quarterback position is going to be different, because if you ball, you could be as much of an asshole as you want to be. But if you're not like one of those top tier guys, you're going to need your teammates around you to really pick you up. I think that was a big benefit for Sam Darnold in Seattle. It was that stretch where Darnold wasn't playing very well. And I forgot the defender's name, but his teammates came out and defended him and saying it wasn't on him. And I think his teammates really liked him, and they really seen the vibe with him, and they were able to go on and win Super Bowl. And oddly, I think Mendoza's teammates seem to really like him. You don't get to go from a team that I think a lot of people thought Indiana would be good. I don't think anyone thought Indiana was going to go undefeated last season, with a bunch of guys from a bunch of different places. Mendoza himself was a transfer. There's a lot of JMU guys on the team. Kurt Cignetti's old team. And he brought a bunch of underdogs together and got them to winning the national championship. And I think that can't be overstated of how good he was overall. And I think for a team like the Raiders, who just need some level of stability and someone who can galvanize the team, I think Mendoza is going to be a good starting quarterback. How good he will be, the jury, I think, is still out on that. But I definitely think he's the guy that the Raiders are going to enjoy on their team for a long period of time. I think there's two guys who I think are can't miss. And as a Giants fan, I am doing everything I can, wishing upon the stars that they both end up on my team. And that's Caleb Downs, the safety from Ohio State. And it's also Jeremiyah Love, the running back from Notre Dame. I think Caleb Love is going to be great. Everyone that you talk to seems like they like this guy. Everything that you read about this guy seems like he already knows what he wants to do. He knows all the defenses. We are talking about like a Kyle Hamilton and Ed Reed level safety. And I just think those guys are super impactful. And for a draft where there's so many question marks, you don't necessarily know about the wide receivers. There's a lot of edge rushers, but even those guys might come with some question marks. I think those guys are the cleanest guys to get. And I always have this weird thing in football, in the sense where football really values, the position that you play, right? Just because you are the best player at your, position, you might even be the best player in the draft in some instance, like with Caleb and with Jeremiyah Love. But because they play safety and running back, they're not going to go as high, potentially. And fundamentally, I just find that to be kind of flawed logic. I get quarterbacks, right? Especially with the rule changes. Quarterbacks now, you can have a great quarterback on your team for anywhere between 12 and 15 seasons, right? But outside of really that, and guys who might play left tackle and defensive end, you're getting 7 to 9, 10 prime years of pretty much everyone else on the field, if they were a great player, right? If you have a great linebacker, he's probably got 8 to 10 great seasons in him. Same thing with the safety. Same thing-ish with a running back, maybe knock a year off or 2 off of that. Wide receivers, same thing. Like, we really don't see any like superstar level wide receivers stay playing into like their early to mid 30s. So I think whoever comes away with those two guys, whether it's the Giants who get both of them, somehow maybe the Jets come up and get both of those guys go to separate teams. I think those guys are going to be the two guys we talk about the most from this draft is going to be Caleb Downs and Jeremiyah Love. And speaking of Caleb Downs, if you're an Ohio State fan, I feel like you have to feel some type of way. The fact that you didn't win a national championship, and then you're going to have possibly 4 guys go in the top 10. And Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, Cardell Tate, and obviously we just mentioned Caleb Downs. And I get some of the Ryan Day frustration because you have all this talent. They're going to have another crop of guys come into the NFL and be top tier picks next season. And the idea that they just haven't gotten back to the national championship game. They obviously won 2 years ago, but I can understand where Ohio State fans get so frustrated in the sense that they have essentially the best team, whether it's money can buy, they can develop, and they only have essentially one national championship to show for it. Sucks to suck. But I think that the storylines coming out of this draft, what the storylines from this draft are going to be, is going to center largely on how well a lot of these teams are able to fill out their rosters and the fact of how much NIL and the transfer portal has come in. Because a lot of these guys that they're getting now in the NFL and also in the NBA draft are a lot older players, older in the sense because a lot of these guys are staying in college for the money. And I think anytime there's an effect, there's like a societal effect, something happens in the ecosystem, it takes years for, I think, maybe it's media, maybe it's common fans, maybe it's even general managers, people in the know, to really pick up on the change. And I'm really curious about how this change is going to be. We have several guys that are in like their early 20s, early 30s. No, not yet. but definitely in their like early 20s, when you used to be getting guys coming out at 21, 22. Now you're having guys coming out at like 23, 24 years old, 25 years old. And how is that going to affect them coming into the NFL? Unlike basketball and unlike potentially hockey, these guys' bodies are going to get worn up so quickly that I do wonder if that's going to be an overall effect with the NIL era, in the sense that college is essentially going to maximize more of these guys' time versus what's going to happen in the NFL, where those hits are going to accumulate going on. So this draft is going to be interesting. Obviously, by the time you guys have heard this draft already happened, so you already know where all these players are going to go or what teams they've already been on. But we're going to see what kind of impact a lot of these guys can be able to have. For a little game that I'm going to play with you guys right now, it's called Some, None, Need a Doctor. I'm going into teams, players, executives who have some, none, or need a doctor level pressure on them. And the first one that we're going to talk about is scouting, right? Some, none, need a doctor. Now you might be wondering, why am I talking about scouting as something that has pressure on it? Well, if fans didn't know, John Lynch, the GM of the San Francisco 49ers, made a comment on scouting and talking about AI. And I think everyone kind of looked at it was the Amazon, I was going to say Amazon, Amazon WS commercial that was basically like, find us a first round pick. And they basically literally got everything they needed from AI, and they picked this one guy in the commercial. It very much seemed that John Lynch, that commercial hit him in such a way that he's like, I need to actually do this. John Lynch makes these comments saying that it's so easy to now use AI. You just plug some stuff and you get it out. And it is not a secret that AI is very much in our space. I went to a conference earlier this year, and someone who was talking to us about AI and AI uses and saying how we are really not at the beginning of the AI takeover. We are just in the middle of it. The whole thing I talked about of like, we learn things later on, even though it's already into our system. That is what is going on. And I can see there being a time where scouting just gets reduced if they feel like they can just punch things into a computer and get certain things out, right? Ultimately, that I think is going to lead to a lot worse evaluation, because ultimately AI is not going to be able to tell you whether or not this guy is going to get drunk on a Saturday night before the game, get in a car and get into a DUI, right? AI is not going to be able to tell you whether or not this guy is actually committed to playing football for the long haul of his career, or is he going to stop and retire and become a pastor? Like, there is so much desire to be in on this front that we have essentially not been able to sit back and recognize and go, hey, this might actually have some serious drawbacks to it. And John Lynch making this comment, I think, was somewhat flippant, but also kind of giving you a little peek into what some of the NFL offices into. So this is going to be need a doctor for for scouts going into the league. The next team I had up on this was the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals traded away their 10th overall pick to the Giants, getting back Dexter Lawrence. Joe Burrow just having a very odd season. He got hurt in the beginning of the year. They were awful for a large stretch of that time. He came back. They still missed the playoffs. Burrow has missed the playoffs, I believe, every single year except for one since he's made the Super Bowl. And I think he's just getting fed up, honestly, with the Bengals. And this is ultimately the way that the Bengals have gone for most of my life. They simply beat the football out of you. And I think they recognize it. Zach Taylor and the people who run the facilities there at Cincinnati realize that their star quarterback is like, I'm this close to asking out. And let's see how this goes, because not too long ago, there was a Cincinnati Bengals quarterback who said, I'd rather retire and then subsequently play for the Raiders than play for your franchise anymore. That same quarterback then got the Arizona Cardinals to the NFC Championship game and almost won an MVP. I don't know if the Bengals are quite at crisis mode, so there is some pressure on them, but we will very much know halfway through the NFL season next season whether or not Joe Burrow is going to stay a Cincinnati Bengal or not. Because that guy is a great player. He's about to enter his 30s. He still is going to be in his prime. But of the big four guys that we have, Mahomes, Lamar, and Josh Allen, he's the one who's gotten hurt the most. And this is with Lamar Jackson, who runs all the time. So definitely think there's going to be a lot of pressure on not just Burrow, but the entire Cincinnati Bengals organization. Next up was a two-parter. Kyler Murray, and Kevin O'Connell. Kyler Murray is getting essentially the vet minimum to go play for the Minnesota Vikings. And this is very much a make it or break it time for Kyler. We will see what they have done with the draft and what they've done with their picks. It's all set up for this guy to be super successful. Another guy who his teammates may or may not have loved going into it. But this guy is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league. Won a Heisman Trophy, went number one, has had some success. He's made 2 Pro Bowls in his career. But ultimately, him also getting hurt, torn ACL. He was hurt again last year. I don't know how much he was hurt and how much he was benched. And the Cardinals just gave up on him. But he has a new lease on life. We have seen a trend of quarterbacks who failed in their previous spot, been able to get with a new coach and pop. He's got Justin Jefferson. He's got Jordan Addison. He's got one of the best offensive coordinators as a head coach in the NFL. This kind of is going to be his make it or break it time, and whether or not to see if he's able to establish himself as a starting quarterback. There's no way in hell I think J.J. McCarthy is beating this guy out. And Kevin O'Connell, I think, is also under a little bit of pressure too. We're never going to know how much he wanted to keep Sam Darnold or not. Obviously, after the fact, it's way easier to say that I fought for this guy the whole time, but at the end of the day, he was part of the organization that let him go. And they chose to go with J.J. McCarthy, which was as clear as a mistake as it could have been. So now they're getting another do-over. They're in a really tough division. I still like the Packers. I think the Lions are going to have a nice bounce back year. We'll see with the Bears. There might be some regression with their team just because they won a lot of one-score games last year. But I think Kyler Murray has all the makings of a guy that could really have the year that Sam Darnold had. Maybe not necessarily go to the Super Bowl, but definitely have the Vikings back into the playoffs, if not winning the division as well. So I'm going to put some pressure on him just because I think that the bar is low enough to where if he just plays well enough, maybe not even make the Pro Bowl, but if they win, 10 games and get in and he plays okay, I think that either the Vikings will give him an extension or some other team will give him, a contract extension, kind of like what happened with Darnold 2 seasons ago, right? Next up, Jalen Hurts. The Eagles have had such a weird time. By this time you were listening to this podcast, Jalen Hurts might have had his replacement draft. There's some people who think Ty Simpson's going to get drafted. I think that might be a stretch too far, but listen. When it comes to certain quarterbacks, you're only a tick away from getting kicked out of your job. Jalen Hurts, who has already won a Super Bowl, who seems like he is beloved, or at least I thought he was beloved by the Philadelphia Eagles fans, seems to have regressed. I'm looking this up now, stalling for a little bit just to see. Next season, he's on the books for $31 million, a little over $31 million. The season after that, he's on the books for $42 million. The Eagles can cut him after next season. It's not going to be too bad of a cap hit. Right now, it's just going to be $24 million in dead cap, which if you look at what the Dolphins are doing, eating $99 million in dead cap in Tua Tagovailoa, this is peanuts compared to that. And I think this is going to be a massive year for him. As a guy who you think has gotten his team to 2 Super Bowls, who has won a Super Bowl, won a Super Bowl MVP, played great in both games, and he might be fighting for his supper. But I think this goes back to the idea of the same thing with the quarterback play we talked about, right? All the good things that happen in life have a counter to it, right? There's always going to be something that comes with the fall of that. And so with every single quarterback getting second and third opportunities to become starters, to play up, where the pressure, I think, overall on fans might be a little bit lower for them. The flip side of that is that if you have a situation like Hurts, where he has a season that isn't as good as I think a lot of people expected, and then you're having comments about, hey, we might not like this dude, that's the kind of stuff that gets people's wheels turning and thinking we could get out of this guy's contract if we need to, because we have another guy that we can replace if we think that, the situation is best set up for him. I do not know if he has a good coach. Again, I cannot say that he is a bad coach. Again, Nick Sirianni got a Super Bowl win for the Philadelphia Eagles. They can never take that away from him, okay? I do not know actually what he does well, okay? He seems like he's beefing with his best player in A.J. Brown. He's yelling at the fans a lot of times. He doesn't call offensive plays, defensive plays, special teams. And the thing that they did the best, the Philly special or the little sneak or the quarter or the tush push rather, they don't do that as well anymore. And I am just fascinated to see how Jalen Hurts essentially has to be both the quarterback and the head coach. Because Nick Sirianni sounds like a clown a lot of the times that he's talking. And I could just imagine being that kind of guy with that amount of pressure on him. Again, they might have drafted a quarterback by the time you were listening to this podcast. So this might have jumped up exponentially by the time you're hearing this. But I think he has unquestionable amount of pressure. I need to see a doctor immediately type of pressure on him going into next season for him and the Philadelphia Eagles. Next up, Andy Reid was on this list. A couple of weird, I don't want to say weird, but a little bit of an odd kind of time for the Chiefs. They got smacked in that Super Bowl 2 seasons ago. They were one of the most helter-skelter teams last season. Holmes tears his ACL. They end up finishing, I believe, 6-10, 7-10, I believe, last season. Ray Rice. Rashid Rice had not a good year from suspension and then all this other stuff. Xavier Worthy wasn't as good as he was advertised to be. You have the Travis Kelce / Taylor Swift kind of stuff. And I'm just curious to see, is Andy Reid going to keep going? 68 years old. He's been with the Chiefs. He's got to have been with the Chiefs for like 13 seasons now. I'll double check right now. It's with the Chiefs. Andy Reid has been with the Chiefs for, I was right. Ooh, right on the nose. 13 seasons with the Chiefs. I'm pretty sure he's been there longer than he's been with the Eagles, which is, God, people are getting old, but it's going to be curious to see because he's not going to have Mahomes. I don't think he's going to have Mahomes very early on. There's a lot of belief that Mahomes, at least he wants to try and play week 1. I don't necessarily think that's smart for him to do, for him to play week 1. You're going to have Travis Kelce back. The guys are coming back. We're going to see what they're able to do with whatever draft pick they have. But I am curious. Belichick got out in his early 70s. Coaches don't coach a lot into their 70s. Again, Reid just turned 68 years old, so he's getting up there. I don't think that Kansas City will ever fire this man. Like, he's done way too much for their franchise, completely revolutionized what their team was for him to ever be gone. But I do think there's going to be some pressure on him, especially because Mahomes is going to be out, like I said before. But the division is going to be nasty. You still have the Chargers, who are really, really good. The Raiders have just gotten Mendoza with Gary Kubiak's son. And the team that already won the division, I believe, got even better in the Denver Broncos. So there is a world where I think, even with Mahomes back, the Chiefs finish third or fourth. I don't necessarily think that they are a shoo-in to make the postseason again. And this is ultimately one of the main reasons why as much as Mahomes, I think, is a physically better quarterback than Tom Brady, I do not think he's going to achieve the same level of heights that he did, because a lot of the reason why Tom Brady was able to do that was because he had a free pass to the postseason every year. His division was awful every season. And that's just not going to be the case with Mahomes. The coaches are too good. The quarterback play is too good. And you still, outside of that, have to still beat up on Burrow, Lamar, and Allen. The competition around you is still so good that even if I consider you to be the best player in the league, you or your team are not so much better to where you can essentially not have to worry about getting into the postseason every year. So I think Andy Reid has some pressure on him. Again, nothing to think he's going to get fired or anything like that, but definitely going to have to be on his P's and Q's if he wants to be able to, get this team back into the playoffs. The next guy that we have on this list is Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is still the quarterback for the San Francisco Giants. And I don't know, call them San Francisco Giants. The San Francisco 49ers, woo, it's slipping so much in the head every single time, man. The reason why I have Brock Purdy on this list is because this guy seems to get hurt a lot. Last season, he had the turf toe injury in the first game. He seemed to re-aggravate a bunch of times. He didn't have the best of seasons even when he played. He was fine. I mean, he had 20 touchdowns. He threw 10 interceptions. He only did that in 10 games. They were able to beat the Eagles, which went them into a massive panic until they got absolutely thunderstomped by the San Francisco 49ers. By the Seattle Seahawks, where every year it just feels like the team just gets beat the hell up and aren't able to finish out the season. But he's a guy who ultimately plays for a coach, what we just talked about, the system, who doesn't seem like they really need to have Brock Purdy to be as good as they need him to do to get to the Super Bowl. They obviously already got him to the Super Bowl. He's clearly a very good player. It seems like the teammates seem to like him. But I am simply just worried that he is physically not going to be able to hold up. And, I'm looking up his contract right now just to see how much he's still left to be owed. He's still pretty good left into his contract. He's only going to be 27 years old coming into this season. He's at 23, 30. But then after that season, in 2028, he's at 56, 71, and 66 million. All this is guaranteed. The Niners don't really have any outs in his contract. He's pretty much making all of this money. Making this kind of money for a quarterback is light compared to, what the guys like Lamar and Patrick and Josh Allen are going to make. But it'll be interesting to see if this guy can stay on the field and help this team win games. Another guy in a great division, where he's battling the Rams and the Super Bowl champs, the Seattle Seahawks, if he's able to stay upright. Not necessarily there's going to be that much pressure. I would say pretty much some pressure on Purdy. But I think there's a little bit there for his own reputation and how good he conceives himself to be. Because I don't necessarily know if people actually know where he can be. I think a lot of people who look at him as a glass half full go, he got the team to the Super Bowl a couple years ago. He has a little bit of a Tom Brady-esque feel to him where he just makes plays. I think a lot of people seem to like his moxie and toughness. But if you go almost glass half empty, you can argue that every quarterback that's played in their system has had some version of this success, whether it's Mac Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo, the list goes on and on. I kind of lean more to the glass half full. I think he is a good quarterback. I think he's appropriately paid. I do think that you should have a good backup quarterback because I think this guy is going to get hurt a lot. And I think that you need to have a lot of the pieces around him in order for the team to go super, super far. And which is why I'm curious to see where exactly they go this year. I wonder how they're going to attack this draft. He seems to be a guy, the 49ers rather seem to be a team that gets good draft picks, or rather get good players in their draft. But yeah, I'm just interested to see how he's able to handle all of this after having a season where I think it ended okay. I think a lot of 49ers fans will sit back and go, even though they don't like how they got smashed in that playoff game, they could look back and go, we were hurt a lot of the year. We went on the road, we beat the Eagles. We were able to finish strong. And let's see if Brock is actually, if he's fully healthy, what they do coming into next season. The last guys that we have on here is a nice little 2-pack. It's the guys from the 2023 NFL draft. We have CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, who I feel like are going in almost completely opposite directions. CJ started out so strong. Rookie of the year, won the division. He's been in the playoffs every year. But that last 2 playoff games, I think everyone looked back and go, yikes. I mean, they were talking about this guy being the MVP of the league his rookie season. He was played that well. And I don't think he's played anywhere close to that level ever since. And then you had Bryce Young, who I think people looked at and frankly look at as almost like being maybe not a child, but like such a sympathetic figure. I don't know if it's that he physically looks small. There's a picture of him and Mina Kimes standing next to each other, and Mina looks demonstrably bigger than him. And how he got benched and how much it felt like people had to apologize for him going to the Panthers. To him, ended up backdooring their way, but getting into the division and almost beating the LA Rams in that playoff game where he played pretty well. I'm fascinated to see where both of these guys go. I think they have good quarterbacks. Rather, they have good coaches on their team. Defenses are pretty solid. Super easy divisions. Both of these guys I can see winning their division next year. And yet I can see both of these guys not being on their team in a year from now. And seeing that for Bryce Young, I think that was a little bit more of a common belief. I think most people thought this guy might not necessarily be this dude. The Panthers will at some point move off of him. I did not think that we would be having this conversation about CJ Stroud. He was terrible in those 2 playoff games. Awful. And by and large part, people remember the super small sample sizes over the 17-game season. And for both guys to have finished at 2 completely different places at the end of the year speaks to the fact that you cannot crown these quarterbacks so damn fast. It takes time to see where guys go. Perfect example. Giants fan here. I want Jackson Dart to be very, very good. I want to believe in him. I have seen numerous quarterbacks have really, really, really good rookie years and look terrible come year 2 or year 3. So for both Bryce and CJ, they have a lot to play for. A lot of money is on the line for them. You can see them both rising to the occasion and getting a Tua level contract extension. And I can see a world where both of these guys are just not on their teams next season. And they get sent somewhere else. But that is all that we have for you guys today. Thank you guys again for listening to the Men Who Cry podcast. Like we say, like, subscribe, review, tell a friend to tell a friend. We are going to get something above my head at some point. We're still working on the setup on this pod. We already got the stand up. I already saw someone commenting saying that the volume was too low last time. I hope this works out this time. Jacked it up for you guys to be able to hear me better. But yeah, this is the Men Who Cry podcast. We're still working on the pod every single time, but thank you guys again for listening.